Mailbag part 2, answering your questions from social media about the Pacers during the All-Star break. More about Tyrese Haliburton's injury, Quenton Jackson's short and long-term future, covering a losing team, tanking, and way more coming today on the Locked On Pacers podcast.
You are Locked On Pacers, your daily Indiana Pacers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? Happy Monday. Hope you had a great weekend and All-Star weekend, and welcome into one other edition of the Locked On Pacers podcast, where we, of course, talk about the Indiana Pacers. As always, my name's Tony East. I cover the team for Forbes and Circle City Spin, and today, this episode's being pre-recorded like 4 days in advance, so if something crazy happened at All-Star, or something slightly newsy but not huge newsy happened to the Pacers, we'll get to it tomorrow. If not, this is even better. We're doing part 2 of the mailbag. Part 1, we talked about the coming off season, some back trade deadline asset rankings, Tyrese Haliburton's recovery, which will come up today, and so much more today. Some similar topics, but adjacently fun in terms of Tyrese Haliburton's rehab, rebrands, covering a losing team, tanking, Quenton Jackson, and so much more. It'll be super, super fun. Let's just go right to it. Robert S. Jerry on Blue Sky says, have you heard whether Tyrese's rehab is expected to help with his recurring back issues? Good question. And I haven't really ever asked about this. I probably should, because I could, and I have access to the people who can answer these questions. But I have at least thought, not about his back, although that is, of course, something that's been brought up with him before. But when it comes to him having over a year off from playing competitively, right, a secondary benefit of, look, it didn't end up mattering last season, but post-Olympics, a big part of and some people wondered, early in the season when he was really struggling up through December, is his hamstrings. Remember that, the playoff injury, and then did he re-aggravate it in the Olympics? It was suggested he got hurt again during the Olympics, but the team never provided specifics, and then he was struggling, so naturally everybody asked, and he would never say it. He would never admit to it. A lot of athletes don't admit when they're hurt, so it wasn't like any smoking gun or anything. But in terms of his hamstring injury from 2 full years ago, basically, but that was still a thing last year, his back stuff that we've heard about for forever and ever, obviously the Achilles itself, the time off will at worst be helpful for all of that, the calf, and at best, make them less problems, but obviously an entire tendon, reattaching to the rest of the tendons and allowing him to play basketball again is subtractive more than additive. But yes, that is a tangential benefit of all this, is that some of his other nagging things from his life or from his NBA experiences or his Team USA experiences now become presumably, or hopefully if you're the Pacers, less of a factor. Pacers fan in LA on Twitter, at Pacers fan in LA, easy peasy, says, similar to one of the questions above, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on, one, what the Pacers will be able to do this offseason depending on whether they have a pick or not, and whether they need to decide to go into the tax aprons, etc. And two, what you see as their main needs. Thanks. Yes, I think if they get a pick in the top 4, that will be almost all of their offseason. They will make a pick. They will probably keep Cam Jones. They'll decide if they need to keep Micah Potter. And that might be it. That truly might be their entire offseason, is draft pick replaces Kobe Brown's spot on the roster. Cam Jones and Potter are back. There's your 14. Do they keep a 15th? How far over the tax do they want to go? Because they'd be over it, basically, if that was their offseason. Maybe they'd want to tweak their two-ways, right? Quinton Jackson literally cannot be on a two-way next year. Maybe they want Q on a standard deal. Maybe they want to get a second-round pick so they can have a cheap rookie on their team to help with their spending. There's lots of little things they could consider, but a lot of them are spending-related or very, very back-end of the roster-related. That's if they get a top 4 pick, because then their big addition, and potentially an impactful one, although rookies are hit and miss if they're going to be awesome or not, is that player. It's the player that they draft. And obviously there's all the spending parts. I talked about this last Friday. If you missed it, they're already right now, just with their guaranteed salary for next year, so half of Cam Jones's deal plus the 11 players with actual guaranteed contracts, about $7 million shy of the currently estimated luxury tax line for next season. If they get a pick 4th or higher, the first year salary of that player is going to be upwards. It's going to be in the 8 figures, right? Upwards of that for sure. So they'd go over, right? And they'd go over potentially by a lot. And so they'd, maybe not a lot, but they'd have to manage the first apron at that point, right? So I would expect that they'd be very cautious about the rest of their spending. And if they can get a cheap rookie minimum, if they can reduce Potter's salary by a little bit, that would, of course, be meaningful to them. But, I mean, look, as the Pacers have seen this season, you can never guarantee health, but Haliburton, Zubats, Siakam, Nembhard, Nesmith starting, Toppin, McConnell, Walker and Shepard, Walker or Shepard, whatever, draft pick and Huff or Cam Jones, Furphy, whatever. Like they have a full team. They don't need anything specific. It looks like of the top 4 guys, granted, maybe they love somebody that no one else was talking about. It looks like the top 4 guys are all forwards or bigger. So it's not like they would be getting a guard, but they have a hole at potentially 2 or 3 with the second unit. Boozer is, I have not watched any of the prospects with any sort of time enough to have opinions, but Boozer, in terms of the Tony prospect things, seems awesome, right? So you just play that guy with the second unit and call it a day. So their rotation would be set. It's not like they would need to hunt somebody down in free agency if they got a pick, but there's obviously always little things you could think about, or some of their older players. Do you want to get somebody to backfill them in case of injury? Any sort of number of directions they could go by getting a second rounder for a cheap player. 2 ways will always be a point of discussion. Things of that nature. As I'm talking, Shams Charania is tweeting about expansion, which is great because that's a topic that's coming up later. As for the other part of that question, which is their main needs when it comes to their spending versus the draft pick, that's why I just kind of ran through the rotation potentially being set, because they don't need anything, right? Especially if they keep largely the same group that they have right now. They'd have Potter could slot in as your next 4 or 5 if you have an injury to any 4 or 5. He's kind of proven he can play both positions if he's still around. Is Jones showing you enough that he can be your third point guard? Maybe. If Shepard and Walker and a draft picker on the team, are they all going to be able to play? And then Furphy will come back at some point, presumably next season, right? Do you need another guy even there, right? So there's a lot of directions you could point to about they have enough reserves to kind of fill in. But if they don't really believe in Jones yet, because look, their young players are at least all showing something, right? But they're trying to win. They are trying to win next year. They would not have traded for Zubats if they're not trying to win games. Do they feel like they need a veteran third point guard? I keep bringing that up because they said they needed one this year. They tried to get one, and none of them really worked out. And now it's not as important because winning is not as important for the Pacers the rest of the season, and Quenton Jackson's good enough, and maybe Quenton Jackson is the answer to that question. And if Quenton Jackson's on a standard deal, guess what? They don't need anybody to fill in this fictional role I just described. You can never, have enough bites at the apple at some wings with either a skill that's clearly NBA ready or some athleticism. But I mean, they don't really need anything specific because of the depth that they have. But I would say if they're going to try to get something, I think it'd be a multi-year cheap contract player, because their cap situation is what it is. They're very expensive and going to get more expensive in 2 years when Nesmith's contract basically doubles and everybody gets raises, but McConnell might come off the books at that time. What's Walker and Shepard going to cost, right? So there's all these questions about their spending future. If they can get a multi-year cheap contributor, and we'll talk about that with, again, one of these players in a second, that would be the only thing I would pursue, basically regardless of position. If they can get a 3-year guy who's unproven but might be able to play in a pinch, I would do that as the Pacers, right? I pretty much regardless, just because that they're going to need cheap guys pretty soon. Maybe Furphy can be that, but his contract will run out at some point. So that's a good question. Their spending beyond next season, or beyond this season, really is going to be a topic very soon. The segment is not over yet, so I'm going to grab a YouTube question and then get to the other 4 in a second because they're all longer. This one's from YouTube at Chase30M. This was after the Knicks game. Said, Tony, wouldn't mind a little excerpt about your travel, which games you get to go to, who pays, how you choose, etc. Maybe you've done this and I missed it. So good question. So I pay for my own travel. I've never had an employer pay for my travel. So I have to, or I try to, one, cover the team better every day, but, do enough or cover enough that I feel like it was worth it. One, because I like the storytelling and podcasting part of all this, obviously, but, people need to feel compelled and feel like they went with me or learned something about the team or learned something about the game from the voice of the players that I got from being there, right? Because I can watch a game at home and tell you what happened. I do that sometimes. So what is convenient, like for example, right now I'm in a hotel in Manhattan, is when they play 2 games in a row in the same city. So it's much cheaper. I don't have to fly twice. I just fly to New York one time, for example. They play the Wizards after the break. I'll be at those games. Same thing. There's 2 in a row in the same city. Every game I can drive to in the Central Division, I try to be at. If there's a huge, meaningful game, the NBA Cup, Haliburton returns to Sacramento, something like that, I'll try to go to those. But a lot of road games I can't make it to just financially. I can't do it. I would like to be at every game if possible, but it's just not feasible for me. And I hope that, again, I mentioned this when I talked about the Washington Post last week, the coverage you guys are getting about the Pacers is fulfilling for you and you enjoy your experience that I am hopefully providing. And if not, let me know how I could be better. Good question, though. And traveling is very fun. It just is. I like being in other cities. Okay, many more things to come, including a Quenton Jackson question and many more things of that nature coming up here on Locked On Pacers. Hello from Vermont, everybody. Quick break so we can talk about FanDuel. Ever wanted to experience the NBA Finals live and in person? FanDuel is giving you the chance to turn that dream into a reality with their NBA sweepstakes. Here's how it works. Use your private boost on any NBA future. You'll automatically be entered for a shot to win an NBA Finals trip for two. That's right, flights, tickets, the whole experience. If you are already looking at the board and thinking about which team could make a deep run, this is the perfect time to lock it in. Futures this time of year, whether it's picking a team to win the championship or grab a conference title, adds an extra layer of excitement to every game down the stretch. And now you can can you pick cash, but it could also send you to the finals. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Use your private boost on an NBA future and get entered to your chance to win a trip to the NBA Finals. Play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. We are back here on Locked On Pacers. Thanks for making us your first listen today and every single day. Check out the Locked On Podcast Network's new offering, the Everydayer Club. Access to an ad-free audio feed for this podcast, Locked On Pacers, obviously. Apple Podcast, Spotify, every major podcast app, an invite-only, members-only Discord server with you can chat with Pacers fans or general NBA fans. It's great, and people have really enjoyed it who have hopped in so far. Let's keep rolling through your questions here. Next up from AJ Reese, the king of the three-parter, although not today. Someone else has joined you, AJ. 1, any word on a possible jersey rebrand coming? I have not heard anything of the sorts, but it would be kind of weird to do in the middle of one player's era. Usually those come like, oh, they traded away Paul George. Like, here comes a new era, air quotes, of Pacers basketball. And they take more time than that, but there's usually some synchronizing of like, oh, the Wizards seem like a rebrand is coming kind of team, right? They have a lot of young players. They're about to be good. They have 2 new stars on their team. Now is the time to do it. You know, I have not heard anything of the sorts right now, but I like their current branding, if I'm being honest. I know that is not the popular opinion. I like their current standard jerseys, and I know that is also a fairly unpopular opinion. 2, how do you have to change your approach when covering a losing team versus a winning one? That's a great question. There's kind of 2 things that I think are important. One is I mentioned this a month ago on this podcast, and they started winning a fair number of games, but now they traded their pick. It's probably going to pivot to what I said. At some point this season, maybe now, post-All-Star break, right now I talk about what happened in the game, and I'm going to do that still. That is, to me, and I hope this is always the case, especially in this era where people just love drama and slop and transactions, and I think that stuff's interesting, to be clear. People just forget that the games dictate the transactions, not the other way around, right? So I'm going to talk about the games, but at some point it'll be like Summer League where I type out the 6 players, the young guys of the most interest the rest of the way, probably, right? Shepherd, Walker, Jones, any young guy of consequence down the stretch of the season who's still playing, right? Furphy would have been on this list. Huge bummer that he's not. The 2-way guys, right? And then basically every game there's a segment of like, what did they do? Did they do anything to prove or change your opinion of them, their role next year? Did they do anything new? Things like that. So 1, it's going to be a lot more about covering the development of young guys who will matter next year when the team shouldn't be a losing team. And then 2 is like exploring different avenues of storytelling. I already have written down 4 ideas of stories I want to do after the All-Star break that are hardly related to actual basketball that I just think will be fun or interesting kind of angles to talk about covering these athletes and their journeys as players. I hope I get time to do them. So that's always a thing. And then newness, things that are new. Kobe Brown, welcome to the team. I'll have a story about him probably up by the time this episode is out. You know, if they do anything different with Q or sign a new 2-way player, what's the deal with that? Something of that nature. There's always some angle to cover, whether it's the long-term future, the short-term future, the new things that will matter beyond just like, hey, here's what we're talking about right now. 3, AJ, thank you for asking. How has your Rocket League journey been going? I can't believe I'm talking about this on a Pacers podcast. Quite good. Grand champ for the 3rd season in a row. I need to play less, but I can't help it. Anyway, yes, that is the only video game left that I actually enjoy. Mason, 25, whose name is just Mason. Mason, I see you all the time. You're the GOAT. Says, what do you expect the Pacers to do with Quinton Jackson, especially for next season? This is a great question and very related to something I talked about earlier with their spending. So, many of you know this, but to get to it, Quinton Jackson's on a 2-way, obviously, and he's not 2-way eligible again next season, which is sort of critical to this, but sort of not. And they have an open roster spot right now, the Pacers do. Now, they're also close to the tax. I've explained this, but there will be a day when a minimum contract for the rest of the season, and by the time this comes out, it might be now or close to now, where the Pacers can afford to have a minimum player for the rest of the season instead of the tax. I think it's the 17th. So by the time this is out, it'll be a few days away. And so from that date on, it is technically possible for the Pacers at any moment to convert Quenton Jackson's contract to a standard contract and then backfill his two-way slot with somebody else. So here's a key date to know. That's March 5th. That is the last day teams can sign players to two-way contracts. And I bring that up to say that would be the, to me, last day that the Pacers would do this, right? So if they're going to convert Q, it'll be within a month of this episode coming out, likely within weeks. Because by then, if they convert him and he gets a standard deal, they could reuse his spot. Whereas if they wait, they would just have an open two-way spot sitting there doing nothing. On March 5th, conveniently, the amount of money Quenton Jackson's minimum contract for the rest of the season would be is over $200,000 less than tax, which I keep bringing up these dates to say it's possible. I'm not saying they will do this or that it's prudent to do this. It is possible for the Pacers to sign a player to a 10-day, like right before their games against the Wizards, and then when that expires, then they convert Q later. They would still be under the tax doing something like that. So there's still ways for them to balance the roster. And I bring up that 10-day option to evaluate or promote somebody with the boom or something like that because, as I always have to say this with two-way guys, I understand converting them is different. They can play in the playoffs. They can play every game. There's no worry about the games. Right now, as of me talking, that's actually not true. There's a few games missed, but Quenton Jackson has like 17 or 18 games left that he's able to be active in this season on his two-way right now. They don't have to do anything. They don't have to convert him or anything like that. And that would get him to March 5th. So he can play every game for the Pacers until they would, if they want to, give him a standard contract. So they don't have to do that. He's on the Pacers right now. He cannot play every game on his current two-way deal. So that is, of course, a very relevant consideration for them is how exactly do they want to handle the timing of all this? They could, if they want to spend as much money up to the tax but not cross it as possible, they could sign, I'll make this up because he's balling, right? Jalen Slauson to a 10-day on February, whatever their first game is against the Wizards. And then that would expire. And then on March 5th, they sign Quenton Jackson to a standard deal. And then they sign a different player to a two-way to backfill his two-way spot. And in fact, Slauson could be that two-way player. He's playing quite well for the Boom. Maybe they want a wing. Maybe they want a center. Those seem like, with Furphy's injury and Zubac's health, the most natural positions, especially Toppin being hurt. But anything would be reasonable. They're losing a point guard in Q on a two-way, but he'd be becoming a standard player. So those are all the financial considerations. Right this second of me talking, and when this episode is scheduled to come out, they can't technically do it yet without crossing the tax, and they would not cross the tax for Quenton Jackson. And they don't have any games restrictions because he got hurt earlier in the season. But if you made me guess what the Pacers would like to do with their open roster spot, they can only afford a minimum player anyway. I don't think there's here's another date, sorry. I don't think there's a better use for it than Quenton Jackson, but March 1st is the other important date. That's the buyout deadline. That is the last day teams can waive a player, and that player is playoff eligible if they sign with another team. So if you're the Pacers, maybe you want to wait till then and see if, I highly doubt it, but someone interesting to you gets bought out. Jeremy Sohan just got cut by the Spurs like the day I'm recording this, and he probably wants either a better team or more opportunity than the Pacers can offer, but what if that happens? Maybe you'd want that guy instead of Q. I'm not saying I expect that or that somebody would be more valuable than Quenton Jackson, who gets cut from their team. The buyout market very rarely produces somebody of significant value, but you can at least wait and see. So in my head, I'm thinking early March, late February is about the time. If they're going to convert Q, they would do it. That's when I would be thinking about doing it if I'm a decision maker for the Pacers. And as of right this second me talking, before any moves are made, and I'm recording this episode 4 days before it comes out, so forgive me if something has happened, I cannot think of a better thing for them to do than convert Q. The risk you run is a bummer, and that's that he gets hurt between now and then, like significant injury. But if he doesn't, that would be my expectations too strong, but my prediction for what they'll do at their open spot is before March 5th, but late February, to early March, they will convert him from a two-way to a standard and then backfill his two-way spot with somebody else. That player would obviously not be able to play in every game down the stretch, but most of them. And as for financials, it would be great for the Pacers to be able to get him on a cheap contract in future seasons, especially if it's non or partially guaranteed because of what I mentioned earlier. They're going to be flirting with tax lines and apron lines in these future seasons. If they can get Quenton Jackson on a minimum deal or close to minimum deal in future years, and he can be their third point guard who could play if, McConnell shows signs of aging or there's an injury, that would be huge. That'd be very important for them to do. They did that with Terry Taylor and Dwayne Washington, two different structures. One of them, Terry Taylor got less guaranteed money at the end of his conversion, but more guaranteed money the next season, and he was on the team the next year. Dwayne Washington got more guaranteed money up front, less in future seasons. He got cut after Summer League, right? So there's ways to structure this. There's a lot of conversation about what makes the most sense. I think if I'm the Pacers, I'm trying to get him on a 2-year at least and maybe 3-year deal, all close to the minimum. But if you wait, you can actually bump his contract a little bit above his minimum for the rest of the season, perhaps as a little reward. And you can use the MLE, give him a 3-year deal with very light to no guaranteed money in future seasons. Sign someone to a 2-way. I'll just say Jalen Slauson because he's on the boom, but there's a million ways that could go. And that would be your team for the rest of the season. Anyway, good question. There's a lot of ways for that to go, but that is the Quinton Jackson experience. I'm looking forward to seeing what happens to them. He's clearly very good. They've played a rest/tanking game and just been like, no, don't play. Go sit on the bench for the rest of the game. 2 more questions to get to on this mailbag edition of Locked On Pacers coming up here. One more break here, everybody. We got to talk about 2 groups of people. First up is Indeed Workplace Chaos. Deadline stacking up. Inboxes overflowing to one position you have to fill, still sitting open. When the pressure's on, you need the right hire. This is a job for you to fill with sponsored jobs on Indeed, who will help you reach the people who actually fit what you're looking for: skills, expertise, location. So you're not just hoping the right candidate stumbles across your post. Here's a stat that says it all. While this minute I'm talking to you, companies like yours make 27 hires on Indeed, according to their data worldwide. If you are hiring, spend less time searching and more time interviewing candidates who check all your boxes with Indeed sponsored jobs. Spend less time searching and more time actually interviewing candidates who check all your boxes. Less stress, less time, more results. When you need the right person to cut through the chaos, this is a job for Indeed sponsored jobs. And listeners to this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to help you get the premium status it deserves for your job at Indeed.com/podcast. Just go to Indeed.com/podcast right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this very podcast. Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire. This is a time for Indeed sponsored jobs. And we also very quickly need to talk about TurboTax. Tax season doesn't have to take over your life. This year, TurboTax makes it easier than ever to just hand things off and move on with your day. With TurboTax full service, you can still have your taxes done for you by a trusted local expert, start to finish, without any stress or guesswork. Instead of spending hours trying to figure out the forms, you can meet with a local TurboTax expert in person, or you can connect online to handle everything: W-2s, self-employed forms, and work to get you every deduction. You upload your tax documents, you go about your day. You get updates right in the TurboTax app. It's a huge time saver. Gives you real peace of mind knowing an expert is handling it for a limited time. You can have your taxes done by a local TurboTax expert for just $150, all in. And if a TurboTax expert didn't file for you last year, just file by February 28th. Take taxes off your plate. Get back to your life. Visit TurboTax.com/local to book your appointment today. And we're back here on Locked On Pacers. Thanks for making us your first listen today and every single day right here on the Locked On Podcast Network, the #1 sports podcast network. 2 more questions today, and then I'll be back tomorrow with more relevant topics about the All-Star game and moves the Pacers can still make this season, including that one that I just talked about. Zach on Blue Sky at ZRCR says, blatant tanking on the level of Jazz and Wizards hasn't traditionally been in this organization, being the Pacers' DNA. Behind the scenes, do you get the sense they will change that this time around, or be extra cautious with guys but still be themselves and just hope for some good lottery luck for once? Great question. Yeah, the Raptors started this trend last year. The Jazz did it last year too, of the close game. Don't put your stars who are available in the game. Scotty Barnes didn't play in close games last year. Markkanen, and now he's injured, but Jaren Jackson not closing close games. It's very strange. I actually want to opine on this for a second. I've already mentioned this. People really complain about that. And I get it. It's annoying. It's a close game. You want to see the best players on the floor. I'm not saying that that's dumb or wrong of your opinion or anything like that, but it's like the NBA can force Will. By the way, the Wizards did this too this year. They closed the game with clearly not their best players. It's not like the NBA can be like, hey, you have to close a game with some of these 7 guys. You have to. You can't force a team to play anyone in any situation. So I don't think there's any – part of me thinks it's more noble to play the guys half the game than none of the game, but part of me hates it because then that means they're available and just not playing. I don't know. And the other thing people say is, with Zubats has had this happen to him, the Wizards stars trailing Anthony Davis. Oh, this is ridiculous that they're not playing. The NBA needs to step in. Well, I've said this already in the show. If the NBA said that, let's use Zubats. He's on the Pacers as an example. They said he has to play after the trade. He was playing for the Clippers. He has to play. Let's say he does play and he hurts his ankle even worse. That's the NBA's fault now, right? They can't enforce these things. So that's why the NBA with the draft and with protected picks And the way they do, and the lottery has created the incentive for teams to do what they're doing. It is their problem that they have to solve, but that's why it's so blatant, because the teams are incentivized to do what they're doing. And the Pacers, I think, are more so doing it than people are already admitting. Here's what I'll say, though. People always like to say it's not in their DNA, and that's true. Usually they've been certainly more noble about it than other teams. Like, I still think Zubats, and Chad Buchanan told me this on the record, Zubats and Toppin are going to play again this season, right? They're going to get their guys on the floor. However, we've already seen them rest against the Jazz. We've seen them rest against the Nets. And in both of those games, they did not close with their best guys. Quenton Jackson was balling against Utah. He sat on the bench in crunch time, right? They just played the Nets last night to be recording. It's their last game before the break. Hopefully it's fresh in your mind. Jarris Walker, leading scorer, didn't play in crunch time. Ben Shepherd, old reliable, didn't play in crunch time. Quenton Jackson did not play in crunch time, right? It's not like the Pacers are way above this. And people keep saying, no one answers me when I say this. I'm not saying you, Zach, who asked this, think this. There's so many people who say, the Pacers never tank. I'm like, what do you think happened at the end of 2022? What was that to you? And some people say that Brogdon was really hurt. And I'm like, yeah, okay. I have some beachfront property to sell you. So I'm not saying I do think the Pacers have done it less and less egregiously and it's less in their DNA than their teams. But it's not like they don't understand the incentives the NBA has provided them. And now here's the difference. They have provided themselves the incentive by making the trade they made with the Clippers to have a bottom 4 record. Bottom 3 is even better by 4% than fourth worst. So I do think that this time around, with the trade that they made and with the way the NBA structures the draft and lottery, that yes, they will be very cautious and their back-to-backs will feature a lot of rest. And I don't think you'll see a lot of high minutes the rest of the way. The All-Star's over. Siakam made it. The trade's over. They did it, right? It's all over. And of course, they're going to hope for good lottery luck. But I think their biggest hope of all is that some of these teams at the very bottom can find a way to win some games. And people forget, these teams all play each other at some point. The Pelicans are going to be trying. They don't have their pick. And let me just name a few games that are going to happen at some point this season. If this page ever loads, I apologize. For example, the Brooklyn Nets still play the Kings twice and the Wizards once and the Pacers once and the Mavs once and the Grizzlies once. The Sacramento Kings still play the Pelicans twice, the Pacers once, the Nets twice, and the Jazz once. The Jazz still play the Kings once, then the Wizards twice. Twice we get Jazz Wizards. That will be a delight for all of us, right? There's so many of these. The Wizards still play the Pelicans, the Pacers twice, the Nets, and the Jazz twice. There's a lot of wins that are going to be picked up, and that doesn't even account for the Memphises, the Dallases of the world. So I think their hope would be that just some of those teams win enough that if they are more noble, they'll still be able to finish in the bottom 4. I don't think I said this a month and a half ago with the way the NBA is trending, that I think it'd be hard for the Pacers to get out of the bottom 6, period. And I think now with their incentives, they can and should try to get into the bottom 4. We'll see how hard they go for it, but I do think they will do some things. I think they recognize that. That's what made me so mad about the Nets game. Someone has to lose who is trying to lose. It's hard to lose on purpose. The players on the floor are going to try. They're fighting for their life contractually. Even if the coach sits what I would perceive as the best players on the bench in crunch time, and whoever makes the decision sits out players for rest and injury purposes, the players on the floor are going to try to win. And if Micah Potter is balling and Cam Jones hits a game winner, you win the game. And especially if it's a rookie, like that should be a good thing. Anyway, that's just how it's going to be. There's going to be wins along the way for every team. I hope that answers the question. I do expect them to, and as they've shown it already this season a few times, I do expect them to be cognizant of their draft position. Maybe not as egregiously as other teams if history is a lesson, but who knows what actual level. I honestly think the hardest part of that would be like telling the good players to not play anymore. They all love to play. It's their job. It's their life. The last one comes from Rooster, the GOAT, via a DM, Rooster Bra. He said, who would you want with the number 1 through 4 pick if we get it, or a 10 through 15 pick if we get it? Great question. I have no idea. I've watched zero college basketball with any seriousness. I watch IU sometimes. Basically whenever I can, I try to watch IU basketball, but I have not watched. I've watched maybe one full game of the top 3 guys. I have not seen Caleb Wilson play once. Some people say, how is that possible? You cover the Pacers. I will watch a ton of their games when the Pacers season is over. Right now, I will only watch the NBA. I know maybe that is a failing of mine, but I'll get to those opinions when it's time. Part 10 through 15, I literally have no idea. Beyond Wilson, and I guess this Fleming's kid's good, I have no idea. Which 8 players, would you protect in an expansion draft? Yeah, Shams tweeted about that today. There is talk. Brad Townsend reported it too. A possible expansion next year. Everybody talks about Vegas and Seattle. The cities don't matter. Look, I mean, I think if their goal, which they have made very clear, via the trades they've made and the success they've had is winning. The 7 are obvious, right? Haliburton, Siakam, Zubats, Nembhard, Toppin, Nesmith, McConnell, the good players, the ones who could guide you into the postseason would be among them. I think some of you would say maybe not McConnell, and I would hear the argument. And then it depends. Like if they get a top 4 pick, that player would 100% be one of them. And then that might be 8. If that doesn't happen, I would personally imagine that they'd protect Jarris. I would imagine Jarris would be a popular pick for an expansion team. After that, who knows? Furphy could be a pick. Cam Jones is a recent high pick, could be a pick. Like you're really trying to pick who the expansion team would be interested in, because Jay Huff's a good player, but why would the expansion team be all about a backup 5? Maybe that his contract is awesome. So Shepard was a recent first-round pick. Maybe he'd be in the mix. I would probably project Jarris Walker, and I just named 9 things counting the draft pick, but I could hear arguments for McConnell, Walker, a little bit of Shepard, some Cam Jones, some Furphy, although his injury certainly clouds things for how that would go, but that will potentially be a topic. I have not watched the Shams video about his reporting. The last one from Rooster, and the last mailbag question. Which of these players do you expect back next year? Potter, Jones, Peter, Thompson, Kobe, and at the end, James Johnson. I do not expect James Johnson to be on the team. Kobe Brown would have to be pretty dang good the rest of the way, given what his 3 years have been and what his contract realities are for next season, but not impossible. Ethan Thompson and Taylor Peter are currently already under contract for next year, although you can very easily waive a guy on a 2-way. I would put Thompson over Peter. He's just been straight up better than him, and Peter's older for a rookie. So expect to be back. Cam Jones would be first. He's young. They just picked him. He's half guaranteed next year anyway. The savings would be meaningless to waive him. After that, I think Potter and Thompson would be my next 2, then Peter, then Kobe. James Johnson would be funny, but I super doubt it. And that is part 2 of this mailbag. Thank you all for tuning in for both of these parts and allowing me to vacation a little bit easier. Tomorrow, we'll be talking All-Star Weekend, Siakam's inclusion, the events in general, what changes I would make to the whatever this is. I haven't seen it yet, obviously. And then Wednesday/Thursday, we'll do moves the Pacers can still make this season before it ends. We'll talk Pacers Wizards after that. I'll be in DC. So thank you all so much for listening. Hope you had a great weekend. We will see you tomorrow talking more Pacers.